Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Richard Robertson. This is the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Committee, 18th of July 2024. Can I see apologies for absence? Mike Todd Jones, I think. Councillor Todd Jones.
Councillor Todd Jones, Chair.
Councillor Bick.
Chair, yeah, I'll have to leave at 5:30 because that's when my group meets. It's a reason that makes this a really unsatisfactory way of doing scrutiny in less than half an hour.
Point taken. Sorry. Let's get on with it, though. Any declarations of interest? No.
Chair.
Yes. Oh no, not the cycle campaign.
I was told by the solicitors that I have to repeat this. I'm a member of CanCycle, Chair.
Right. Any other declarations? No. No public questions. So we're going to take Treasury Management first because I think we'll get that one out of the way. So Jodie, would you like to introduce the Treasury Management report?
Thank you, Chair. Conscious of time, so I'll rattle through this fairly quickly. This is the routine annual Treasury Management outturn report that will be reported to this committee and then on to full council each year. So this sets out the performance of our Treasury Management activities over the 23-24 financial year as compared to budget, and then sets out the prudential indicators at the end of the year. So just a couple of things to draw your attention to where there are significant variances. Table on page 39 shows our capital spend for the year. We budgeted £150 million across the General Fund and HRA after carry forwards from the previous year. We actually spent 107, so an underspend there of £43 on capital. Most of that is capital slippage, and that is set out in the certainly the General Fund side is set out in the General Fund outturn report that we'll consider later. The result of that means we've had to take less out of the council's cash balances during the year than forecast. So where we were expecting to take 57 million out of cash to fund capital expenditure, we've actually only had to take 26 million out. And that has contributed to higher than budgeted interest receipts for the council during the year, which is the other big variance really to draw to your attention. So there's a table on page 41 which sets out our average return on investments for the year. Clearly, throughout 23-24, interest rates continue to be higher than we had forecast previously, and that's continuing now. So again, we see overall deposit return for the year of around about 4.5% compared to 2.14 the previous year. And that has resulted in total Treasury interest earned for the year of just over £7 million, of which just over 2 was HRA. The remaining just short of 5 million was General Fund. Which is approximately 5 million more than we had budgeted initially. And that is a combination of higher than budgeted interest rates continuing for the year, and as I said before, higher than anticipated balances invested due to slippage on the capital programme. I don't think there's anything else I particularly need to draw attention to, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
All right, open to the floor. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Bick?
Chair, are you going to divide this up between the big picture and then the little picture represented by the appendices, or what? I have a comment about the big picture anyway first.
The Treasury Management report isn't very. Has it got appendices?
We're doing item 2 first.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Sorry. What Jodie was describing is the differences on the budget and actual for interest primarily. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you very much. A very clear report, Jodie, which I did manage to explain to my group. And they're quite happy they understood it. And unfortunately, as a result, I have a question, which is that there has been a lot of interest across the council about BDS and particularly Barclays. Divestment from Barclays because of their armed investment, in particular armed investment, and I understand Councillor Gilderdale has also mentioned it. Are we able to communicate that to our investment advisors link and mention that we would prefer to avoid Barclays over the year?
Okay, thank you. I think, first of all, it's fair to say our investment, as it were, in Barclays is not via Link. It's by virtue of their role at the moment as our main council bankers, and we have an ongoing banking contract with them, which runs, I think, until early 2026. We are aware, obviously, of the motion that was passed at full council a couple of months ago, asking us to explore options to move away from Barclays, and we have been doing that. We put the member engagement for that on hold during the pre-election period, but I will be picking that up again with members shortly in terms of how we take that forward.
Thank you for that. And I remembered from days when I did a bit more accountancy that some accounts are actually loss leaders to banks, particularly ones with high numbers of transactions and low levels of deposits. So I appreciate this might be a hard thing for public to understand, but before we rush to divest, can we be sure that our account is not a disbenefit rather than a benefit to Barclays?
As I say, I think we need to look at all of that. What I would say is our current banking contract ends in 2026 anyway, so there would be a requirement for us, as at the end of any major contract, we would look at all of the options at that point anyway. But clearly you do make the point about the attractiveness sometimes as of local authorities as clients, so we are somewhat restricted as well by the market, clearly.
Any further questions? No? All right, I'll take you to the recommendations, which are on page 38. That is to note the report. Everybody happy with those in favour, please show. It's unanimous, I think. It's unanimous.
Voted, Chair.
Sorry?
Councillor Bick's not voted, I don't think.
He's not.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, that is now
That's
unanimous.
unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we go back to item. Oh, sorry. Smith. Would you like to accept these recommendations, Councillor Smith?
I'd like to accept the.
Right, we go back to item 4. Jodie, would you like to introduce item 4, the outturn?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual General Fund outturn report for 23-24. Apologies that this wasn't ready for the previous Strategy and Resources Committee. We have sort of obviously hopefully been clear with members on the reason for that, but we have been able to bring this forward now. There are 2 substantive recommendations here for the Executive Councillor, which are to recommend to Council to approve the carry forward requests in line with the Council's constitution. So those are as set out in Appendix C and Appendix D. Aside from that, it's for the committee to note the report. So main revenue outturn is set out on page 5 of the agenda pack. Let's check I've got my page numbers right. Yeah, it is page 5 of the agenda pack. So we had a final budget for service portfolios for the year, a net budget of £26.7 million. Final outturn was 20.7, so we are looking at a £6 million net underspend for the year. Now, the main reason for that, as I said earlier, is related to increased interest income on our treasury management side. Following carry forwards, we're left with a net variance on the general fund of £5.7 million. The main reasons for the underspend are set out at paragraph 3.5 at the bottom of page 7. So we have there £3.7 million of excess interest income earned in the general fund. Underspends, smaller underspends elsewhere of just under £500,000 on industrial properties and provisions. We have a net underspend on the Corn Exchange and Guildhall Cultural Services. That's not just an underspend, but also overachievement of income at the Corn Exchange due to some additional events taking place and higher than anticipated income. So those would be the main reasons, and obviously there's clearly more detail set out at Appendix B in terms of some of the more significant underspends and overspends within individual services. In terms of capital outturn, as I mentioned before, roughly a 30 million underspend for the year on the general fund, of which about 20 million isn't really underspend, it's slippage, so that's to be rephased into the following year. The remaining 10 million that's sort of a genuine underspend, if you like, is primarily as a result of some loans to KIP, which were budgeted but were not required in the end because projects had finished. So essentially, that's just funding that then remains within the capital programme. Main slippage, again, is on the loans to KIP for the land south of Cambridge, 6.8 million of slippage there, where the project's been slowed down due to planning application process. We've had about 3.5 million of sustainable warmth grants, where there's been slippage on the programme, mainly due to the complexity of the grant scheme, and also capacity of contractors really to deliver some of that work. So again, all that money will slip into 24-25, so it is still available to be spent, but it's just taken a bit longer than planned. Table at the top of page 9 sets out the general fund reserve position, following all the overs and unders. So at the per the budget, we had budgeted to contribute £5 million to the general fund this year. With the variances in year, we're actually ending up contributing £13.8 million, but 3.1 million of that is carried forward spend to be spent then in 24-25. So the general fund balance ends up at £41.8 million. Now that obviously sounds like a lot, but we need to take into account carry forwards of 3.1 million. We have, as a council, in the budget setting report for 24-25, we have committed to set aside £22.8 million of that balance for specific reasons. The biggest one being the £20 million that's been allocated to the Civic Quarter Reserve. So when you take all of that into account, the remaining unallocated general fund balance at the end of the year was £15.9 million. And for context, that is as compared to a target balance of £6.9 million. So we are around about 9 million higher than our target balance in the general fund at the moment. We need to bear in mind, obviously, we do have significant budget gaps going forwards. Per the BSR, if we weren't to achieve any savings, we would have a budget gap of £1.8 million in 25-26. And essentially, I think 6.2 million in 26-27. And when you take that into account, if we were to do nothing, effectively, we will be back down at the target level by the end of 26-27, and actually well below that, 27-28. So I think that just sets out the kind of the position where we are in the medium term. Following that, the appendices obviously go into more detail. But I'm just conscious of time. I know some members have said they need to leave at 5:30, so I'm happy to pause there and maybe take questions focusing on areas of interest.
I think as Councillor Bick earlier suggested, let's take the whole pictures first pages before we go on to the appendices. Any questions on the overall overview picture? Councillor Bick.
I wonder if Jodie could explain a bit about the impact of the kind of really large numbers involved in the underspend on the capital programme. I totally understand the dynamics. We're going to rephase, the projects will still need to be done and so on and so forth. But it just seems that pretty routinely, a very high percentage of what we plan to spend in any year is not spent in that year. And I'm just wondering what the consequences of that are to the finances of the council. I mean, in practice, it means that there was more money available that was unlikely to be spent than would have appeared to be the case from the way we budgeted. And obviously then that might have presented some opportunities. I just wonder whether we seem to assemble a capital programme based on individual project managers across the council budgeting for their project on the basis of hope rather than reality, and sometimes entirely not their fault, but in a way, wouldn't there be scope for the council to sort of bring all those kind of items for the capital programme together and us to take a higher level view and say, well, actually, realistically, that isn't going to happen, and so we would allocate a smaller sum to the capital programme whilst leaving the capital programme as it was. Or we could drill down into the organisation and make people kind of phase their projects in the first place more.
Can we keep the questions shorter?
No. Well,
Jody,
it's
do
a-
answer that.
I think it's a valid contribution given what the report we have here.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think it's fair to say we have some quite significant capital projects going on, and some degree of slippage in capital programmes is not unusual. I think it's fair to say. I think we should also remember that the majority of our capital spend is financed from resources which are ring-fenced for capital purposes. So we would not be able to redirect that money into council services, for example. I think the element of carry forward of the 20 million odd that we're carrying forward, it's just under 3 million that is actually revenue financed, and the rest of it is financed from capital resources anyway. So that money would sort of sit there waiting to be spent. I think if you look at the projects that have actually finished, there aren't big overspends and underspends generally. So I think it is an issue of phasing in the majority of cases. The spend does slip, but it still happens. Clearly, we need to build the budget on a project-by-project basis because we need to make sure that that money is available for each project as and when it's needed. But I mean, it's certainly something we can look to challenge as we build the budget next year and just really look to really challenge on that phasing and make sure that we're being realistic and we've got things in the right place going forward.
Councillor Bennett.
I'll be as quick as I can. I just want to say that when you have a timing variance like that, and we still have inflation, that you will normally end up spending more later. So it's actually the other way round from what Councillor Bick's saying, in my humble view.
Further contributions? No? Councillor, yeah.
So I think here we see again that there are many underspends scattered across the results. And I just wonder, I mean, we have taken in the budget for this year, we have taken some reductions into some savings, but it just feels a little bit padded out to me, the budget, and I just wonder whether there's an issue with budgeting accurately. I wonder, Jodie, if you could comment.
Before you do so, Jodie, isn't it the case that most of the slippage is because schemes completed early and didn't need to be funded from, whereas a lot of the minor ones are the ones that you're worrying about, I suspect, but they are a lot of the small schemes. Could you perhaps put those two questions together?
Well, perhaps I was talking not about the capital, about the
sorry.
revenue. Yeah,
Okay,
I've
sorry.
moved on, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we clearly do have both overspends and underspends throughout the general fund. I think that is something that we need to look at as we go into next year's budget setting review. I'm planning to do a more detailed process with the services this year and hopefully really trying to get to the bottom of some of those recurring underspends where we do have them. Because you're absolutely right that if we've got budget built in that we don't need, we should be looking to strip that out because that can be taken out with no impact. So that's definitely something we will be looking at as we go into the autumn.
Right, because I mean, one of the Liberal Democrat concerns is we've got big issues on which we're not spending any money because of budget constraints, and actually we're finding out that actually, I mean, the interest cost is of course a big element of that. Arguably, also could have been, anticipated, we'd like to see the budget fairly kind of allocated and other projects that are currently being neglected, like housing repairs, being properly taken into account and having adequate funds.
Councillor Smith, would you like to contribute? Yes.
I think the thing is, if you look at the table, the bar charts in section 3.3 of the report, and you go along this line on a service by service basis, it appears that underspends occurred in the community wealth building programme, which I think that was we agreed to allocate substantial amounts of funding towards that programme, and I think it was anticipated that it would be up and running by the end of the financial year, but it wasn't in effect. So that's not kind of like a frontline service issue. It was over optimism issue, but we're still making progress on that. And I think the other one relates to planning. And during the course of the year, the government introduced higher planning application and other charges, which clearly meant that the service had higher than expected, than forecast income. So the real difference comes in the financial resources portfolio, which, as you have said, is accounted for by two virtuous elements, which was one, substantially higher interest rates and higher balances. So the presentation here is, it's not that services are underspending, it's the fact that the way in which this is presented and expressed here relates to these external circumstances. So it's effectively an unanticipated windfall that has contributed to the big variance. So, our general fund budget is under substantial pressure, and as Jodie's just explained, we will need to make substantial savings in order to continue to fulfil our statutory duty to create a balanced budget. And if we don't do that, then that 15 million in the balances will be exhausted very rapidly, and we'll be looking at a budget deficit within 3 financial years. So, we pursue a prudent approach, but what we're doing is we're investing in service transformation so that we can make these changes, making based on our decisions, not in the context of an emergency budget where we're forced to make savings at short notice. So this is the best way to manage the budget. What you're looking at here is a document that reflects a very well managed local authority, not one that's imprudent with its finances. It's one that's thinking and planning and acting ahead.
Councillor Young, you got anything further, or Councillor Bigg?
Tim.
I'm not going to challenge what Simon says. He'll be pleased to hear. But I did want to, before I have to go, to say that I think that part of the scrutiny here is as much about the areas that the fewer areas of where it looks like an overspend has occurred, which appear not to be noticed if you just approach this from the big numbers. And I do think that is a classic challenge to an organisation, that they say, well, it's an underspend, therefore there's a few overspends, it doesn't really matter. But actually, I wanted to refer to page 15, in the Appendix B. There are on that page three items which they kind of show up as overspends, but actually I think spending is only a part of the issue. It's more about income. These are, in some senses, all like little businesses of some kind. And I wanted to, rather to try and drill down in no time at all, I just wanted to see if we could, as a committee, request to have a report on each of those 3. Well, in fact, it's 2, isn't it? Because one is two aspects of one, and the other is a separate one, the market. Whether we could have a report on the dynamics there, because I think we would be worried if these were to continue, and we would want reassurance or at least options if there are other things we should be doing. Is that something that we could do?
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. Of course, it's concerning when our commercial services revenues are under pressure. There's a variety of reasons for this, and it will be illuminating to shine a light on them. And it actually serves, because what we're doing here is the overall spending power for the council is substantially lower than what we spend under the general fund, because we have a wide portfolio of assets which are generating revenue for us. Previous Chief Financial Officer held that this was quite risky to be dependent on this, because obviously it was subject to changing property markets and values and so on and so forth, and we're working in a commercial. Have an overview of how well those services are performing on a financial footing, and make, because obviously the legacy, there wouldn't necessarily be things we would choose to do, but we've got to have oversight of them and make some decisions around them in their future. So I've got to support what you're saying there.
Okay, well, that's very, I welcome that, thank you. And I do agree with the way that Simon has kind of identified this area of the council's activities. And I think that it does call for, these are activities that we should have, in principle, absolutely be in, you know, unless there's something we learn that says not. But we just have to be perhaps nimble and agile in the way we respond to forces that are probably beyond our control, but given that we commit costs to them, have an implication. So thanks very much.
I mean, clearly, we've got exceptional officers across the whole of the council, and they're all, you know, in these areas, they're alive to these issues. You know, they are running these services. They're on the ball. You know, they're not just letting the losses mount up and so on, and they're actively working on trying to, you know, turn these round or improve revenues and margins and so on. So we can expose all of this later. I just make a comment on the capital programme, and I agree. We need to go through a budget line by line review of where capital items sit, and just check that they are, you know, absolutely essential for regulatory reasons and so on and so forth, or they're going to make a substantial improvements to service delivery and so on and so forth. So we can be assured that what's in that programme is really required. Okay, thank you.
Right, I think we've moved on to the detail. Is that okay? Councillor Bennett, you want to ask a question?
This is more just a quick courtesy remark to say that it's not an issue about confidence in Jody and his team, but because of a change in this report coming forward, it's fallen at a time when I already had an expensive pre-booked residential course on my day job. So I've not been able to spend the time that I normally spend on going through it and assure myself, and for that reason, I will be abstaining on this item rather than voting for it. So I just wanted to explain why.
Okay, any questions? Could you turn that microphone off? Any questions from anybody? No? Okay. Well, we move to the recommendations, which are on yes, page 4. To approve the carry forwards, to approve the capital resources, revenue and capital, as detailed in appendixes C and D. Can I see all those in favour, please show? 3. Those against? Hold on. Those abstaining?
2 abstentions, Chair.
Councillor Smith, do you accept these recommendations?
I do, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That's the end of the meeting.